Clemson and Duke. Duke, I don't want to say dominates, but kind of toward the end seemed like it, 28-7 over the Tigers, who were a top 10 team coming in. First AP top 10 win for the Blue Devils since 1989. Big win for Mike Elko in this program, and lots of questions for Clemson. I'll start with this one, Max. What on earth was that Clemson offense that we saw?
It did not resemble the TCU offense against Michigan in the semifinal last year that you and I witnessed. And you and I both think very highly of Garrett Riley, and I generally trust that this guy is going to figure it out with what he's got. But Sam, to be honest, when we were working through our playoff picks a couple weeks ago, this is what I circled. This is why I stayed away from Clemson as a playoff team, because I think you look at just on paper, you just look at that roster. It's not the most inspiring group of playmakers, and I'm not knocking Will Shipley or anybody there. But certainly when we've seen Clemson be a regular playoff contender, national title contender, they've got some NFL dudes on the outside, and I don't think they've got that right now. I feel like watching Cade Klubnik, and we'll have to talk about him, obviously, I feel like there was just a bunch of moments in that game where I felt like he was thrown to covered guys. They just couldn't really, part of that's on QB decision-making as a sophomore who still, doesn't have many starts under his belt. But those guys were not getting separation. I think Duke's defense did really a terrific job. And I don't know, dude. I mean, it's been interesting to see the reaction this morning. Obviously, I think whenever Clemson loses, people kind of just sharpen their knives and delight in Dabo taking an L. Are we doing the whole dynasty dead thing? Like Grace wrote a good column last night on this game. Like how extreme are we going this morning?
Yeah, I think it's, again, week one overreactions, right? I think you've got to temper it a little bit, but I do think it's worth having the conversation because the issue on Monday night was talent. And particularly, like you said, game-breaking receiver talent. There's no T. Higgins. There's no Justin Ross. There's no even before then, no Nuke Hopkins in that receiving
Williams,
core.
Right. Go down the list. Yeah.
Right. Those guys aren't there. Those types of receivers clearly are not there because you could see Duke was manning up against these guys and covering them. And there was not a lot of open space and real estate in the secondary, not a lot of separation. And so if you're going to have this offense, we talk about Garrett Riley and the TCU offense and what they did last year. They had Quentin Johnston. They had Darius Davis. Both those dudes are playing in the NFL. They had some real dudes that were able to separate and get an open space. And the offense isn't going to work without those guys. And that comes back to the inability or unwillingness of Dabo Swinney to use the transfer portal. Because when you lose, you tweeted this on Monday night, Max, your conversation with Mike Gundy, when you lose guys, you can't just replace them with high school freshmen because you're going to be in trouble for a couple of years. Because when you lose veterans, you have to replace some of them with veterans. They lost 12 guys in the portal and they replaced them with one. And the rest are obviously recruits. So I think it is a real talent issue. And I do think as long as that is the approach, then yeah, I think we do have a serious issue of Clemson being able to contend at a national championship level.
I agree. And I think if Clemson wants to go into the transfer market, they're going to get players, right? This is not a question of, would that be a desirable destination for transfer receivers? And trust me, when it comes to the transfer portal, there is no position that is more like deep in terms of talent becoming available than wide receiver. Honestly, I mean, wide receiver and DB are the two positions that you get hundreds and hundreds of guys going in every year. And there's certainly guys that could play at Clemson. And so I wonder, I'm sure that Dabo Swinney is pretty reluctant to go there. But ultimately, when you have a couple classes of misses at the receiver position, which they have, then you got to figure out some way to make up for that. And I understand the old school thinking of, hey, let's trust our young guys. Let's give them opportunities. Let's let the next guy up kind of go earn it. But, I think we've seen a little bit of a dip at receiver development and production since Jeff Scott left to be the head coach at USF. And that I'm not knocking the staff. I'm just saying, I think when you have some of these misses, you got to figure out a way to make up for it. And I think Clemson came up short there. But let's be honest. Like I understand the glass half full spin on this could be like, oh man, look at all those opportunities they had in the red zone and the fumbles and turnovers and stuff, and act like it's a little bit fluky. I looked this up out of curiosity this morning. Bill Connolly's post-game win expectancy, for Clemson, just based on the numbers, just based on how this game played out, was 16%. I mean, Duke was the better team. It wasn't just a bunch of random plays. I mean, there were some big plays that flipped the outcome for sure. But I think Duke outplayed them. I think Riley Leonard was terrific. Duke's good. I mean, let's be honest. Let's not ignore the other side of this. I think Mike Elko has done a terrific job and is amazingly has won a lot of games very quickly at Duke, which I don't think anybody would have expected in terms of a unproven, DC going into a job like that. That is, from a recruiting standpoint, not the easiest.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you're right about the turnovers, the missed field goals. Some of that was fluky, but to borrow a line to our use, at what point does it stop being a freaking coincidence? Because there were too many of those, and a team of this level should not be making those kinds of mistakes. Kate Klubnik, rough outing, of course, like you said, too many forced throws. And I do wonder, we saw this tweet surface last night, I think from Graham Coffey, about Dabo telling ESPN that Garrett Riley's coming in to run the Clemson offense. And I'm wondering, so what does that mean? Is that just posturing, or does Garrett Riley really having to mesh with what Clemson wants its offensive identity to be, or was he hired to bring in the offense that he ran at TCU? And I think that is important in this discussion, because if he's not running, or if he's not given full reign to run what he wants, then I think that's a problem. And it raises a lot of questions again about the long-term direction of this program.
There was another comment on the broadcast last night where they were talking about their running back duo, Shipley and Maffa, and they were compared to Mixon and Pirine at Oklahoma in Lincoln Riley's days. And I'm like, seems a little generous. I mean, like, I think those guys played well. I mean, Clemson rushed for 200 yards. Certainly they can lean on that duo and probably will need to here going forward a little bit. But I mean, that can be a little bit dangerous when you kind of overestimate what you got there a little bit. And I know for Dabo Swinney, this is shocking in a bunch of ways, but man, there's not like a lot of time to kind of tinker here. I mean, they got Florida State in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it doesn't get much easier now. To echo the point you just made, put some respect on Mike Elko's name. Mm-hmm. That guy won 9 games in year 1 at Duke. And like you said, they were the better team last night. And this is a team that's going to be a factor. Sure. Riley Leonard, terrific outing. Tyler Santucci, the defensive coordinator who he brought over from A&M, thought it did a terrific job scheming up against this offense. This is a really good team. And Elko, a guy who was struggling to get a head coaching gig for a couple of years, even though he had anchored some really impressive defenses at A&M, did a really good job turning around Notre Dame, did a really good job at Wake Forest. He's had success a lot of places. For whatever reason, he was having trouble getting a little traction in the head coaching searches. Finally, the Duke opportunity comes. He takes it. And man, he's run with it, man. Look at how different this program looks since he's taken over.
Well, it helps when you walk in the door and you've got an NFL quarterback, and I think Riley Leonard is proven himself to be that. Almost rushed for 100 yards last night. I mean, I just think that the dual threat aspect of his game, I think, is really impressive. And that kind of game, he didn't seem phased. He didn't seem too worried about. I mean, Clemson's still got a bunch of blue chippers up front, and they can still rush the passer and all that. But I thought Riley Leonard handled that game really well. And I think Duke is certainly, the AP top 25 is not out. As of when you and I tape this, I'm guessing they're going to be in it, right? I mean, I think Duke's going to be a factor here going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on, one last thing I want to get to is we talked about the big picture Clemson concerns. Do you think that under Dabo Swinney, this Clemson program is going to get back to a national championship game?
I think Clemson might be one of those places where the 12-team playoff is going to make the road tougher too. I think that I certainly, I mean, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The ACC is about to get easier when they add Stanford, Cal, and SMU. Right. So, in terms of Clemson being able to make ACC title runs, I think that will continue. But once you get into that 12-team playoff, that will be great for them to play some home games, and that environment will be great. Death Valley will be awesome for that. But in terms of stringing together the run, it's just going to be a different existence, I think, than when it was a 4-team playoff and you got to pull one upset or knock off some team that generally is going to be higher than you in the recruiting team talent rankings and stuff. That's the funny thing, though. Clemson's recruiting hasn't really fallen off, not on paper, right? I mean, it's still a top.
They went from top 5, top 7 to kind of top 10, 11 the last couple of years. So it's not fallen off in a big way.
Yeah.
They've never really been the top 5 recruiting type. They've never been they have won those battles with Georgia and Alabama, and they have had classes that have ranked in the top 5, but they've never been we're going to have the number 1 class every year kind of team. That's just not who they are.
For sure. But I think that, there's going to be some of these programs like Penn State comes to mind that have a chance, Texas or A&M, like that have a chance to get in the 12-team playoff consistently. But can you actually like advance and be a top 4 team? Like, we'll see. I think Clemson, that's the danger that you fall into. I don't think Clemson's fallen all the way off and they're not a top 25 program by any means. But in terms of being up there with the 4 or 5 best teams in the country, that's the thing that has a chance to slip here a little bit if they don't, respond to this the right way and win a ton of games this year. There's no mulligan now.